All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig in a Pickle Krug Show with the Giants video. First Pig in a Pickle, 2 locations, Emeryville and Corte Madera. Check them out. Open from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig in a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. All right, this just in. The Giants on this Friday afternoon have fired manager Gabe Kapler. This had to happen. It absolutely had to happen. Kapler has been a tire fire, and he had to go. There was just no other way around it. He had to go. He's a 500 manager who got lucky with Sabe's crew having career years in 2021. It was perfectly clear. The players didn't like him. I had heard that for weeks and weeks and weeks. He was condescending. He was unprofessional, and he had to go. I mean, the Giants this year were the manager of your team is in a lot of ways the face of your franchise. And Gabe Kapler was a terrible face of the franchise for the Giants. It's simple as that. He had to go. It's not that he was the worst manager of all time. He's not the worst manager of all time. He's a smart guy, and it's not like he didn't know anything about the game. It wasn't like he was just a total fool. He's just not a likable guy. And the Giants, so many Giants fans had basically decided to boycott the Giants largely because of Gabe Kapler. So, there were so many Giants fans who were like, I'll be back when Kapler's gone. And this last year really changed things for Kapler when it came out that Bruce Bochy still wanted to manage. Because when it was painted as, Boch retired and he's going to stay in the organization and it's a new era and, Kapler's going to take over, that was one thing. But once Boch said, hey, I'm not retired, I still want to manage. Then suddenly the whole Kapler regime and era was shown in a different light. Let's go through what Gabe Kapler's done as a manager. 2018 with the Phillies. And look who he's managed, by the way. The Phillies and the Giants. Teams that are not, crying poor mouth. Teams that have a ton of cash. Teams that are in major markets. Teams that have big-time talent for the most part. Now, the Giants this year have not been very talented. But he had Bryce Harper, in Philadelphia. He's always had pretty good talent. Year 1, 2018 with the Phillies, 80 and 82. Year 2 in Philadelphia, 500, 81 and 81. Year 1 with the Giants in 2020, sub 500, 29 and 31. And then they go out and win the 107 in 2021. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, 107 and 55, the most wins in the history of the franchise. I mean, that was an amazing season. But that was also a weird year coming out of COVID. And you had Buster there, you had Longoria, Belt, Crawford. These guys all had career years. And I just think that when you look at just how all the media tiptoed around Kapler, the players never had anything good to say about Gabe Kapler. I don't think I've heard more than one or two guys say anything good. And even the things they did say that were good, they were just kind of like, it's like the kind of thing that you say when you would, when you want to say nothing at all. It wasn't like they had real conviction in their voice. And yet there were several players that he rubbed wrong. I mean, he went super political. You never bring politics into the dugout. You just don't. And, so they win 107 in 2021. They're 500 the next year, which was last year. And they need it. And let's be honest, last year was not a 500 year. I mean, they needed a monster September just to get to 500. I mean, they really were a sub 500 team much of the year. I mean, and then you look at the fact how a team plays in September generally tells you, if they've quit on the manager. Let's look at the teams he's managed and how they did in September. His Philly team in 2018, 8 and 20 in September. His Philly team in 2019, 12 and 16 in September. 2020, they went 500 in September. 2021's the aberration, of course. They just won and won and won and won and won some more. And they went 21 and 7 in September. We'll give him that one. And last year, they needed a 19 and 11 month in September. They finished incredibly fast to get to 500. But it's basically been 2 years in a row that they've been a sub 500 team with a payroll that is, top 10. When you're fifth or sixth in revenue, and you've got all kinds of revenue, and you own your own ballpark, you got to have a better team than that. Plus, they haven't been able to sign free agents, I think largely because nobody wants to play for Gabe Kapler. Tom Verducci just absolutely crucified him by calling the entire regime and the brand of baseball tedious. Now, Farhan, you could easily say Farhan didn't do a good job either. And who knows, maybe Farhan won't last either. I'd be more apt to give Farhan a little bit more rope. Why? Because Farhan has been able to draft and develop and promote to the big leagues Patrick Bailey. And the Giants farm system with Farhan, at the top of the masthead has improved. I think it's undeniable. They have more prospects today than they had at the end of the Sabian Bobby Evans era. And some of that is Farhan. But Kapler was just the hardest guy to like of all time. I am a lifelong Giants fan, grew up in the Sunset District. I found it very hard to root for the Giants under Gabe Kapler. The media tiptoed around him. I went to spring training in March. It was like March 8th, and it's supposed to be like this relaxing early season time. Optimism's in the air. And he got into a little exchange with John Shea over Mitch Haniger's oblique strain and whether it happened at Scottsdale Stadium in the morning or at Talk River in the afternoon. And you would have thought these guys were talking about, something really, really serious. Like who was responsible for 9/11 or something. And it was like there was so little fun, so little joy. Everybody's just tight as a drum. And I just think that, it just had to end. It absolutely had to end. And then this year in September, what are the Giants right now in September? 8-17 or something like that. I mean, they're playing horrendous. They're basically, other than 2021, they've had one season over 500 in September and 4 seasons in the month of September that were under 500. And that tells me that the team's quit on him. He is exhausting. He's an exhausting guy. And, I think Farhan should learn a little something as well. You can't make a million micro moves and micromanage the thing up and down and looking for the manager's got to be, the buck's got to stop with the manager. And I hope they get a powerhouse manager who will have some autonomy and have some ability to lead. So I got to blame Farhan for part of this as well because he's part of the tedious nature of this franchise. But Kapler had to go. He absolutely had to go. And I've seen it on both ends. When he would come on with Rod and Tom and I on KMBR, I would joke with the fellas how you could ask him any question at all. And because he was trying to get on our good side, he'd be like, Larry, that's a great question. It's like, I know when I've asked a great question, and I know when I've asked a middle-of-the-road question, and I know when I've asked a stupid question. And literally, he would just say, that's a great question, no matter what. Like, we do an interview with him, we'd ask him 10 questions. 5 times he would be like, that's a great question. I'm really glad you brought that up. It's like, he's just disingenuous. And it's like everything was for effect. Everything was for effect. And he was so easily threatened. The other day when he started yelling at Kai Correa because he felt like Correa gave him bad information on the ball that went off of Flores' glove, and then he came back to the dugout and he yelled at Correa and stormed away. This is what small people do. And that's what Gabe Kapler is at the end of the day. Then that's like, I can't tell you the number of times he was like, great question, when it wasn't a great question from me or Tom or Rod, and he's just trying to win favor with us. This spring I went down there, and I literally was there like 1 or 2 days after the Cactus League had begun. RJ Dabovich had pitched the day before, and I think it struck out like 5 in like an inning and 2/3. So basically struck out everybody. And all I said to him was, man, RJ Dabovich, huh? Yesterday, Gabe? That might have been one of the best performances I've seen him have. That was incredible, huh? And and the guy struck out 5 in like 7 batters. And you know what he said? Because he knew that I was critical of him and didn't like him and wasn't buying into him, and saw him for the fraud that he was. So what did he say to me? He goes, "I disagree." I'm like, "You disagree? All I said was that was a hell of a performance." I mean, what are you disagreeing with? I mean, it's just like, that's Gabe Kapler. When he loves you, you could ask him anything. Isn't it true that the day consists of 24 hours? That's a great question. No, it's not a great question. And then the next day, if he doesn't like you, or if he's mad at you, or if he's in a pissy mood, he's going to be like, you could ask him the most benign question in the world, and he's going to bite your head off and be like, "I disagree." What's there to disagree with? The guy struck out 5 out of 7 hitters in a Cactus League game, and I said that was impressive. You're disagreeing that was impressive? So I didn't care, because let him. He's a small guy. He can say whatever the hell he wants in his Lululemon, outfits. But you know what? That's who he is. He's disingenuous. And guess who he followed? He followed the most genuine article in the game today in Bruce Bochy. And the players are smart, and they saw through his crap, and they just dialed him out. They didn't rip him, because they're not going to go rip him publicly, but they didn't really support him, and they shut it down mentally. I mean, you saw it the other day when Yaz forgot how many outs there were. Mentally, Gabe's club had turned it off. And I'm glad he's gone. I'm glad he's gone, because to me, I could not root for him. Even though I'm a lifelong Giants fan, I'd never root for the Dodgers or the Padres or anybody else for that matter. I'm a Giants fan. But I couldn't support somebody as small, as insecure, and as petulant. And he's like a petulant baby. And it's just really, really immature, a bully, and just a guy that not a guy you want to root for. Is he smart? Like, the best thing I could say about Kapler, he's competent. He was like mentally competent, but he didn't have a feel for his pitching staff. He had no feel for his club, and being the face of the franchise, one of the most unlikable faces there is. Now, Farhan, on the other hand, is glib. Farhan's incredibly smart, and I have no problem continuing down the Farhan road. But pick a manager that's independent. Pick a manager who's going to, contemplate your analytics, but he's not just going to absolutely blindly adhere to every analytic that comes out of your office just because you want it that way. I get the feeling that, Kapler was a way for Farhan to get his analytics on the field every day without question. The players have to know, the fans have to know, and the media has to know who the buck stops with. And it's got to be the manager. It's the manager's show. In a baseball organization, the manager's got to be the central figure. In an NFL team, the head coach has got to be the central figure. And Gabe wasn't. Gabe was just adhering to Farhan's wishes. I don't blame Gabe for the roster, because Farhan put together this roster, but I kind of do, because I don't think in a team that was going to lean on free agents that free agents want to play for Gabe Kapler. So I'm glad he's gone, and I hope they find a better manager. I think it's a great day for Giants baseball. I'll be going live on my YouTube channel here in the next few minutes. Join me on the Krug Show, and all I'd say is, Cap, good riddance.